Hi there. Thank you for joining our GradeCam 101 session today. My name's Katie Selstrom, and I'm joined by Kate, my partner and colleague in crime, or in success, I should say. We're both former teachers and instructional coaches. I came from elementary and Kate came from secondary. So welcome. We're going to go ahead and jump in today to our topic. But before we do, we wanted to make sure that you were familiar with some of the new navigation in GradeCam. If it's been a little while since you've logged in, you might have noticed that we have a new homepage and navigation on the sidebar on the left there. And there are some links provided within our slide deck today that you are welcome to peruse. There's a video tour that our lovely and talented Kate created for us, as well as some links to support documentation about some of the new functionality that now exists in GradeCam if it's been a little bit since you've used it. So our topic today is reports and viewing and analyzing data. Let me go ahead and exit out of presentation mode and skip down. It doesn't look like I'm hyperlinked to where I want to be, so let me jump there. So we're going to look at viewing and analyzing data. We're going to make this a really short session, 15 minutes. It is being recorded, and all of the links are provided with that bit.ly that you see in the bottom left corner of your screen. So we'll walk step by step about how to view and analyze data within GradeCam. We'll give you some pro tips to go beyond the basics and provide you with some extra credit options that might be of interest to you or that you can share with colleagues if you are responsible for sharing this information with others. So I'm going to show you a few of the slides and then jump right into GradeCam to show most of the content today. But just so you have this as a reference and you don't feel like you have to take notes really quickly, we're going to start off by talking about our three most popular reports. So looking at item analysis, our student exam report, and looking at class or teacher by question and standard reports. So I'm going to show you those. On the left-hand side of this slide, you'll notice that we have links to support articles regarding report basics. We have a recorded video about how to have some data conversations using our GradeCam reports. And there's also an in-app tutorial that will walk you through all of our reports in the system. And I'm actually going to jump into that first to get us started, and then I'll come back to the slide deck. Let me jump right out and jump in. Let's see if it logs me in. Perfect. So if you want a little guidance with how to review data, you can use our in-app guides. And if you have any questions as I'm going along today, please post them in chat. Kate is monitoring that for us. So she'll stop me at any time if there's something she wants to highlight or something that any of you have asked that's important. We'll go ahead and make sure we get those questions answered. And then at the end, we'll stop the recording and answer additional questions if you have them. So jumping in, you can turn these guides on by going into our question mark, our resource center, and choosing to analyze data. That's the guide that will pop up. And if you want to watch it later, you can click show me later and it'll come back the next day. We'll just walk through this quickly just to get some ideas. So to access reports, you can either click view reports as the tile, or just navigate over here to the sidebar and choose reports. From there, we're telling you to pick an assignment that you've already administered and delivered. So you've either scanned or gone online. I'm going to pick one of my assignments that I know I have linked to standards here, and then choose next. And from here, I get to walk through some of our most popular reports. So the landing page that you see is our score graph page. From here, I'm able to see my average of all students that have taken this assignment that I have access to. I can see how many responses I have and some other information about this particular assignment. The way that I can view the data is determined by the performance band that's listed. And depending on the options that you have, whether your district or school has created performance bands or you've created your own, you can toggle between different performance bands to view the data in different ways to make different types of decisions. So if this is a more summative assignment, you could be looking at a grading scale. If this is an assignment that you did in a formative manner and you wanted to talk to your students about how their skills are developing or progressing, you might choose a different scale and even share the data with students. To move on from the score graph, I'm just going to click next. And it's asking me to choose item analysis here on the left side. So this is another one of our popular reports. The item analysis report shows each question and the response distribution, with the green response being the one that was correct on your answer key. So this is a good place to very quickly see which distractors were most popular on your assignment and have a conversation with students or as a PLC about those questions and how they were asked. It's also a great conversation if you want to have with your students. Right now, I have turned a configuration option on to hide names. If I go ahead and take that off, I will see my student names as I hover. So if I am sharing this with my students and projecting this on the screen, I can have the conversation about each question without revealing any of the student names as I'm doing so. So just a little tip there. And another popular report is in our classes section. You do have an option to see an overall distribution of how each of your classes performed on an assignment, but by here we're going to go by question to see how classes performed one question at a time. So I can kind of see the differences of each class and their strengths. For me, I mainly just use this as one class. I'll show you a different example in just a moment with multiple classes. And I also have the configuration option here to add standards in the header, which is what I've done. So if I remove that, you'll see the standards have disappeared across the top. So this would apply if you've added standards to your questions or want to go back and do that later even, you can see those standards reflected above the question. So you have a little bit more idea about which skills were covered. And you notice when I hover, if I can't remember what that standard is, I get that nice description there to remind me. So I can also toggle this by standard and it will collect the questions together that are represented by those standards there. So great options there. And then the guide wraps up with giving me some tips about what I could do next. So if I've made an assignment and I now want to try some other question types, there's some guidance about going beyond multiple choice questions. If I'm interested in those cut points, those colored categories that you saw that I was changing at the beginning to look at my data in different ways, there's information about performance band setup. I can move on to transferring grades if I wanted to take this in a more summative route and take the scores on this particular assignment or on a particular standard and put that in my gradebook. And then again, links to data conversations and how to download the data. So that was just a quick perusal of our guides, again, accessible here in the Resource Center, the Getting Started tutorials, and this Reports for Data Analysis is the guide that we just walked through. Let's take a look at an assignment with a little bit more detail and see some of the other options that we have available. So here I am in an assignment and I'm looking again at that score graph as my landing page. If I zoom out a little bit, I can see some other information down below. Once I've configured this report to show student names, I get a breakdown of the students that are in each performance category. I also have the ability in this students section to give this information to my students. So if I am working mostly in a paper world and I actually want to hand out exam reports to students, I have the option to configure this report. So I have some different options here for printing them on separate pages, showing the students the correct answer and the maximum points or not when we print, or only show questions with less than a certain maximum number of points. So those are some of the options that I have available when I'm deciding how to print my student exam reports. If I'm using the portal, students already have access to their data right within the portal, so I wouldn't necessarily need to print these out, but it is an option, especially for conference time or study guides or any other opportunities where you want students to learn from some of the errors that they've made. Also here you can see, your student overview is going to give you your class list and how students performed in general, but you can see that same view with the by question view. So your student list with how they performed on each question. And again, you can decide to show standards or not. And then a very popular report in all of our sections for students, classes, and teachers is this lowest standard report. So at a quick glance, you can see what are our students' lowest performing standards. You can sort by a particular column if you'd like to and see a grouping of which students altogether had the same standard that they were working on or needed your attention for, and you can decide whether to remediate or reteach in a whole class setting or in a small group setting. So let me pause there and see from Kate. She's my other half, way smarter than I am, has been doing this for a long time. Kate, is there anything here that you wanted to make sure I highlighted before I jump into some of those pro tips?
Those are part of my pro tips, the things that I love.
That's okay. Tell you can sneak peek. Go ahead and tell them about a pro tip.
I would just say, just to reiterate, that configure button is really awesome to get down sometimes a little bit more nitty gritty of things that, how you download it or what does it look like when it prints. So that configure button does change per report. So it's always, even though you've clicked on it once for one report, you may want to get into another specific report because it may be slightly different on the options that you have available to you. And then also all the reports are able to download as CSV and Excel. So if you want to pull that into another system, you can always download it there. And sometimes I like to do that just if I really feel like I can configure just even more, remove some lines, add some lines so that if I was showing something specific to my team, I can do that as well.
Great. And I'll show a quick example of what one of those downloads looks like. I'm opening it in numbers, but those of you with Excel would have something similar. So you can see when you download it to Excel, you get the color coding to come along with it and some of the formatting. If you download it to a CSV file, you get the raw data that you can just kind of manipulate. So it's up to you and what you're looking for when you're downloading. Okay, so real quick, let me jump into some of those pro tips that we have. So Kate mentioned some of the configure options. Drill-in options are really great when you have a specific question that you're trying to answer. So I'll demonstrate that in just a little bit. There's also a way to get to your favorite reports by using favorites. So we can show you some options. I believe you saw me click on columns to sort. So you saw that pro tip, but I also can show you some of the extra filters that you might not be aware of. And then I briefly mentioned adding standards. So this is a tip I hear Kate mention a lot in her data analysis trainings, that if you've been creating assignments in GradeCam, just with your typical answer key and the right answers, and you're looking at reports and you're wondering, beyond knowing that some of your students, achieved below a certain percent or a certain number of students got a poor grade, by adding standards, you can really find out, beyond a student being at a 76%, well, what does that mean for their learning? Which specific skills, contributed to that score? You can always add standards back into your key after the fact. And when you go back to your reports, automatically live updates all your results so that you can do that in the moment data analysis. So that's a fun little trick that you can definitely take advantage of. So if I'm back inside of my report, and I decide that this exam report for students is one of my absolute favorites and I want to keep coming back to it, I have the option to favorite it. And what that does is, instead of having to scroll through all of my reports and find which one I was looking for, I can just use my favorites and there it is, just sitting there for me. So that's just a nice navigation trick that you can use if you have reports that you like to come back to. The filtering options that we have, I have a view of all of the results that have been turned in for any classes that I have access to for the current terms. If I had an exam that was only for my class and this wasn't a shared assignment that I'm using across different PLCs or different classes, I can change that to say my classes. So I think for this, I actually don't have classes of my own in this example. So you can see here that update removed data, but it typically just shrinks the amount of data that you would see. So that's the filtering option there. And then the adding standards after the fact. If I go to my key and I wanted to see what standards had already been applied, I can see here that this key already has standards created. But if I'm the author of the assignment, and this is actually my assignment, I have the ability to check off a question, and I would have the edit option here to go back in and edit those questions and add standards in real time so that I could go back to my reports and see that information. So just a nice little tip there. Drilling in. So let me back up. A really interesting way to think about using GradeCam is to think about using some of our formative and standards-based assignments to look at growth. So I can use the drill-in features to look at growth metrics. I can also use the drill-in features to answer a specific question. So if I go back to the assignment that I was thinking of just a moment ago, let me change this to all my classes. And if I wanted to drill into how a particular subgroup is doing within my assignment, I want to know how students of a particular gender performed. I have the option of selecting that gender. And then you can see in the filters now, I've drilled in so that the data I'm looking at is just students that have that particular demographic tag associated to them. So now as I'm looking at item analysis, as I'm looking at the score graph, as I'm looking at my class performance, I'm able to see that information just for what I'm filtered into. And you'll notice in the report, I'm getting that filter option listed in case I forget. And I also have the filter listed up here. If I wanted to drill in further, I have the option to continue to drill in to find out more information. So if I'm looking for students that are English learners that are also of a particular gender, now I've whittled it down to even a smaller subgroup. So I can continue to use those filters in that way. Another way to do drill in is to think about it from the perspective of the students or the classes that I have access to. So if I wanted to drill into a particular student, I have the ability to access reports from here. And now I'm looking at Emily and looking at her results. And I don't think Emily's mine, so I think I have to switch my filters again. I apologize here. I have the option. Oh, and Emily, I don't have access to. So Kate, I drilled in too far.
Emily is mine. Emily is
I know,
mine.
I cheated. So I have to obviously have students that I have access to, but those drill-in features allow you to kind of narrow down the data that you're looking at. And so if I go back to the option here, and I want to look at 3 assignments and their growth over time, I can use that drill into option here to look at the reports and get longitudinal information about that, those particular assignments, and see if I was measuring the same skills, over time in assignments, I can see how we're doing. And I've already drilled into those 3 assignments. So it kind of shows like that filter that we were using before. And then I can continue to ask those other questions that I mentioned. So I can look into demographics, I can look into different class examples. So I can just keep exploring further and further in. I keep messing with my views here. So apologize, there's my data. Let's find somebody that's me. Whoop. So now I've drilled in 3 different ways with a course, with a particular teacher, and the 3 assignments. And I'm able to see the data from this perspective. So it's just another way to approach reports. It just gives you some more options in narrowing what you see ahead of time. So you're not having to weed out that information by using the filters or the options for demographics on the left-hand side. Kate, did you have any other tips for drill in or filters?
No, that's pretty good. I always like drilling into the multiple assignments like you have displayed there. And probably my favorite report from that, and I think you might be a little bit deep, is under standards. Now click on standards. And then being able to pull out the standards, especially if they have standards in common, one below that, longitudinal. I love this report, but it does rely on having those standards across multiple assignments. Otherwise, you'll see like a break in that line. But you can, what is really nice here, so click on the standards on the bottom. You can turn off if you have like a single standard, just kind of cleans that up a little bit. So if you're focusing in on 2 standards that you see go across multiple assignments, you could bring that out just to see how that growth changes over time.
Great tip. See, I learn something new every time. So just to wrap up, because I know we're getting close to that time mark, extra credit. We do have options for, and we actually talked about this, the standards reports that we have available. So this really applies if you're looking at that skill level analysis. And then adding demographic data. You saw me click into gender, a demographic that was listed for English learners. That is all determined by your GradeCam admin, and it usually has a lot to do with what you already store in your student information system or what you're bringing over from Clever or ClassLink. So definitely, thoughtfully bribe your GradeCam admin with their favorite chocolate or cookies or treat of choice, because it is a lot of work, but it is worth it in the long run to have that demographic data available to help you with your data analysis and really answer those questions around equity. And then for any of the statisticians that are watching this that really want to dig deep into the reliability and the performance of their assignments, there is an item reliability report built right into GradeCam. And this is the support doc that talks a little bit about it. So when you're inside of your assignment, you have the option to really look at that item reliability under your assignment summary. And you get to look at all of the statistics related to how your questions are individually performing and how even the responses are performing. So you can see if it's a valid way to create distractors and questions for your students. So great for curriculum directors and coordinators and just other folks that have that affinity for numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Really appreciate you joining us today. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to our support team at support@gradecam.com or give us a call. We're happy to answer your questions. And if you have additional questions, feel free to stay on and we will go ahead and answer those without the recording running. So thanks for joining us today.